Whether you're buying or selling your home, get the benefit of expertise.
Hey, well, compliments to the show. You're really hitting on the subjects and you're telling the truth. I appreciate you.
Meet the team at dangemis.com. And now, filling in for Dan Gemis, your host, Joyce Blackmere.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in today. I'm Joyce Blackmere, Director of Sales and Broker with the Dan Gemis team. With me in studio, I have Cassie Baggio, Sales Rep Extraordinaire. How are you, Cassie?
Extraordinaire. I am fabulous on this extraordinarily wonderful day.
Yes. We have Patrice Surrett on the line as well from Goldmar Property Management with her tip of the week. Hi, Patrice. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Awesome.
Good.
Awesome. What have you got for us today?
I didn't get an extraordinary introduction, though. So
well, Patrice Surrett is a magnificent property manager. She runs a magnificent property management company in Windsor and services Windsor and Essex County. Thanks for all you do, Patrice.
Thank you. That's nice.
In your extraordinary talents.
Yes, thank you, Cassie. All right. Yeah, we're going to give a little chat about the licensing for those that were following.
Yes.
That were following the appeal and the landlord group that asked for a hearing regarding the licensing. So it was ruled upon, and they did rule in favor of the city, meaning that the licensing program, the pilot program, is going to move ahead, or I guess just not be canceled. They were hoping. So we're back to now waiting for those wards. Anyone with a rental property is supposed to apply for one of the rental licenses. And we talked about this before, like what the steps were. There are a lot of pieces that you have to get together. And it's a bit of a process, but, the city wants everyone to have safe housing, so they are going to move forward with it. And it is a bit cumbersome for out-of-town landlords. One of the biggest things is that unless you come down and apply for it at City Hall in person, you have to get your ID notarized in where you live. You need a police check from where you live. You have to identify a local contact, and that person has to go down in person to City Hall and apply.
Wow.
So it's very difficult for out of town. Yeah, it's one thing in Toronto owners, but we have owners in BC or in the States or overseas. They can't come, obviously, to Windsor. So it's a bit of a process even to start the licensing, right? Just to even apply for it. So it's a lot of work, and people aren't going to be necessarily happy, with the work and the cost. It's $500 to apply per unit. So if you have a fourplex, it's per unit. That's just to apply. And then there's the ESA inspection you have to do, your police check, your notarization of your ID, things like that, obviously are a cost. And the worst thing is, I think, in relation to real estate, these licenses are non-transferable.
Right.
So even if an owner just did it and they got licensed and we have the signs posted saying it's a licensed rental, if it sells, they have to start all over again.
Gotcha. So my question, well, first of all, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of work. So I should mention, or I should ask you then, as a property management company, do you walk your owners through these steps to get their properties licensed?
Yes. Usually if they're asking, if we're designated as their contact, we're gathering everything from them. We do all the back and forth before it even goes to City Hall. So I make sure I have the whole package together, and then I'll go down to City Hall and submit the package, pay on their behalf, and then we start the process.
Great.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that definitely takes away some of the stressors and the unknowns, right? Of figuring it all out.
Oh, absolutely.
That's amazing. So my second question then is, what happens if you have a property that isn't registered yet? It has to go through the registration process. It's tenanted fully.
Yeah.
And let's say that unit does not meet the standards of the licensing requirements. What happens then?
So the first thing would be, we've done a couple where the city has come in and the fire department. And usually what it starts with is those are independent departments, obviously. So we might get an order to do some repairs on the behalf of the fire, right? They may have some improvements you have to do. And equally, the city will have a list of things that would be required before they would actually issue the license. So most of the time, it is doable around the tenant, so it doesn't really affect the tenant. It might be a GFI plug on, in the bathroom or in the kitchen, things like that. But that's usually caught on ESA inspection. So they would be looking at other things that don't necessarily disrupt the tenancy. The only thing that would disrupt a tenancy would be if they deem it that it's not going to be able to get a license, right? So it's not a legal unit, there's no egress, all those big things that obviously, aren't just small fixes. They would basically deem it that it couldn't be tenanted. We would still have to go through landlord-tenant to basically get that tenant out. So if they were still in a lease, we'd have to let their lease finish. Like, they don't have any say as far as getting the tenant out sooner. The tenant still has the rights of occupancy, but we'd have to work towards moving them out with the proper notices and vacate them, unfortunately.
So some of those basement units, where we see those, the ceilings maybe, barely 6 feet tall, and some people are staying in there. We would see that happen in those. So,
and more so with their, like, the ceiling height, I mean, sometimes, when you're building one, there's definitely rules, right? But if there was just areas of bulkheads that are low, they're not necessarily going to deem it that it can't be rented. But what they look for, there probably isn't fire separation. Right, okay. That's more so the case than just the ceilings being low. That's just a sheet of drywall and some wood separating the units. The windows generally are not egress, right, in those basements. So they'd be looking at those things more so than ceiling height. If everything else was okay and the ceilings were a little bit lower, they'd probably let it stay, right? Yeah. But the egress windows, non-negotiable. Fire safety, non-negotiable. So, yeah, unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of those basement units that have been built in the West End. I shouldn't say that. There's some in the South End too, but they just put a unit in the basement, and if they register it, then they're going to come and have a whole list of things they'd have to do to make it legal. And a lot of them were built without permits too, right?
Yeah.
Right. He comes and finds that there's another unit down there. They're going to say, "Where's your building permit?" You don't have one. And I've seen one that they wanted all the walls opened up so that they can start the permit process, which is plumbing inspections, electrical inspections. When you build it without a permit, those checks aren't in place, right?
Right. Wow. Now, the checklist that I'd seen previously to this hold up was quite extensive. Have they made any concessions to that, or is that sticking as it was?
It's the same. Yep. It's the same as it was. Yep.
And now, Patrice, like, this is mainly happening in Wards 1 and Wards 2 right now. Yeah. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but are you kind of thinking maybe under the assumption that eventually this will kind of continue across Windsor as well?
It'd be the whole city.
Across the areas?
Yeah, because that was the argument, or one of the arguments with the appeal was that it was, biased towards those two wards, right, being student rentals, right? But because it's a 2-year pilot project, I think eventually it would have to be citywide. They can't just keep it narrowed to 2 wards. That isn't actually fair. So I'm assuming it would go citywide. Any other city's gone citywide that's done it.
Yeah, that's right.
So
have you seen any displacements at this point?
I have not. I'm more so like what I'm looking at is some of my West End ones were the university, and they're rented by room because there's a threshold of how many room rentals you can have before it becomes a lodging house. So those I see being a problem where they're going to have to change that, right? Have one head lease, which is, 6 people on it. That's fine, and they can all live in there. But when you have a lease per room, it becomes more of a lodging house. And that gets into zoning. There's health inspections that are supposed to happen. If it's a lodging license, there's a whole bunch of different things. Because we have a couple of those too that are bigger student rentals, and it just falls under a different jurisdiction. So I think that's going to be found quite a bit, because I know for ourselves, like, we have a lot of those rentals over there. And even landlords still are asking about doing that, and I'm advising them, like, you're really better to get a big group and let them sign one lease, right? Than have individual room rentals. It's just, the city doesn't like that.
No. Well, that's awesome information, Patrice. If people have questions about property management or the pilot project, how can they reach out to you?
Yep, they can call the office, 519-252-5010, or you can email at info@goldmar.ca.
Awesome. Well, thank you. As always, we appreciate your extraordinary advice.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Okay.
We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few upgrades to housing that are not as common, but they're definitely showing up on the map. It's a report released by Zillow recently. And this is your last chance to enter for the Tickets for Country at Heart. Text the keyword HEART, HEART, to 10800 with your first and last name, and we'll do that draw as soon as we come back. Still more to come here on the Dan Gemus Real Estate Show.